Hey, it's me, your boy Blue Genchika, and today I'll be doing my Yu-Gi-Oh! Tier analysis video. Also, weird thing is, I was trying to record a bit earlier, but the audio was acting weird, and it turns out my audio only acts normal when I turn on the air conditioner, which is weird. Anyways, let's get right into it. Oh yeah, also by the way, I wanted to do a video on the OCG ban list, but there isn't really much to talk about it. Basically, they banned Dragoon and S0, which I'm actually glad for the OCG because they've had to deal with those cards for way too long. Anyways, let's get right into this. First, we have Salamangreats. Salamangreats are a Vrain's archetype, they're a Link archetype, and they're a Fire Cybers deck. And let's get started. They are consistent. They are versatile. They have great defensive abilities because of cards like Raccoon, their Counter Trap, you have Rage, you also have, I think, Parrot. There's a lot of defensive cards in this deck. Oh yeah, including Balinks. I really like Balinks. They have great spells and traps, like really powerful spells and traps. And they have really great recovery because this deck can essentially loop you for a long time. And for the cons, they lost two of their circles, so, you know, it's not as consistent as it used to be, but it's still very, very consistent. And I guess I should put, oh yeah, I did put they're consistent, never mind. They rely too much on the field spell because if your opponent gets rid of the field spell permanently, it's going to be hard for you to get that field spell back. And this deck can't play through more than 2 to 3 negates since this deck is a control deck and you would want to set up back row as soon as possible. It's not a combo deck, so of course it's not going to be able to play through more than 3 negates or 4 negates. And because of that, it can only play through 2 to 3 negates. So I'm going to actually give this deck a tier 1.5. Next we have Rockets. Rockets are an actual fun archetype. It's a Link archetype. They're made up of Dark Dragon monsters, and their goal is to summon your big Boral monsters. Whether it be your Boral Link monsters, your Boral Synchro, your Boral Xyz, or your Boral Synchro monster. Did I say Synchro twice? I'm not sure, but anyways, there's like Borals of each type, or at least each extra deck type. Anyways, let's get right into this. For the pros, they have great boss monsters. Their boss monsters are amazing. When Borreload was released, I thought this was going to be one out of 3 of their boss monsters, but apparently this deck has a lot of boss monsters, all of which actually have meta relevance. Too bad they're good in other decks rather than in Rockets themselves. They can float, but they have to be destroyed, and they float during the end phase, which kind of sucks, but it's whatever. They're versatile because all their monsters, just like with Gokis, their Link monsters and their extract monsters have varying effects, and they can actually help you get out of certain situations. If you want to OTK, go for Boral Sword. If you actually want to, steal and gain advantage, go for Boral Load. If you want to negate, you go for Boral Savage. If you want to, I kind of forgot what the fusion. Oh yeah, Furious allows you to blow things up on both sides of the field, which is pretty cool. Plus, it also acts like a monster reborn for your Boral Link monsters. They also have generic dragon support, which is really nice. And for the cons, they are a bit slow, like I mentioned. You have to rely on your opponent destroying them, and in this fast game, that's actually a death sentence for this deck because of how slow it is. It loses to non-destruction removal as well. It can't play through more than 2 to 3 negates. And even if you do, you don't really end on great boards with this deck. And it's a bit difficult to go into their boss monsters since they're Link 4s. So, yeah, because they're Link 4s, it's very hard to actually go into a lot of their boss monsters. If you're lucky, you might go into a Boral Load or a Boral Sword, or you might actually be able to get out a Boral Load and a Boral Savage. A Boral Load Savage, again, if you're lucky. I mean, the new support they've got makes it a little easier to do that, but still. And because of that, I would say this deck is a tier 3 deck. It's not horrible, it's not horrendous, it's just a bit slow. And it's just not as good as the meta decks or the tier 2 decks, given how much faster the tier 2 decks are. Next and lastly, Code Talkers, or Cybers, as some people like to call them. They have great boss monsters. They can spam monsters onto the field pretty easily. They can create multiple soft locks, which is very impressive, actually. This deck is incredibly versatile because they have a crap ton of monsters due to Playmaker in the anime. This deck can easily OTK and it's consistent. I guess I should also say they have great spells and traps because Kodak, as well as that card that gives you an additional normal summon. That's pretty OP. Not OP, but it's very strong. Oh, okay, this is awkward. And there. And I guess for the cons, they can't play through more than 2 to 3 negates. That's about it. Like, this deck's main issue is dealing with negations, especially going second. Because if your opponent can actually, not just negations, just interruptions. That's usually what I mean when I say negations. Because if your opponent can actually stop you from starting off, you won't be able to actually make the boards you'd want to do. Plus, your opponent can easily just break your board on their turn once it reaches their turn. Which is why I would say this is like this deck's only con, or at least the only con that I can actually think of. Which is why I give this deck a tier 2.5. I might even argue that it's a tier 2 deck because of how powerful it is and how hectic it can be, especially with this horribly designed card. Even I mean it's generic, but it's really easy to make in Code Talkers / Cybers. Anyways, tell me what you guys think about the ratings I gave these 3 decks and what you think about these 3 decks. Anyways, it's me, your boy Blue Getsuga, and I'm out.